event of the year for the UFC has happened. It's over. 2023. What an awesome year. We got a pod next week coming for you guys, day after Christmas. Top 10 moments in combat sports 2023. Me and you compiled a list. We recorded that yesterday. That was real fun. So be on the lookout for that next week. But before any of that, man, what a night. UFC 296. Chef's kiss. That's right. That's right. But anyway, now that I have my Giants hate out of the way, let's talk about UFC 296 because that was such a fun event. And honestly, the prelims were arguably the best prelims of the year. I think that prelim card was better than some of those fight nights that we shit on at the Apex a little bit. But we had even fights in the crowd with Sean Strickland versus DDP. MMA has been wild this week. In a way, it almost feels like this week was a darker moment in the sport just from all the craziness at those press conferences, which we'll kind of get into. But I think with that, you kind of have to just hop right into the main event and talk about what Leon Edwards was able to do to Colby Covington, because that was just an exhibition for Leon Edwards. Easy win. Honestly, like what popped into my mind, like right when I watched it for the first time, that was like your typical Leon Edwards performance. And like I mean that in a good way, because he showed all-around skill in MMA. He picked Colby apart from a distance while walking him down too, which is not as easy as he made that look. The leg kicks added up. I mean, Colby's leg was literally black starting from like round 2 on, so you could tell those leg kicks were hurting him early on, and then I can only imagine how it was at the end of the fight. Out-grappled him at certain points, just looked stronger, looked faster. Just an outstanding win by Leon Edwards, man. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just pretty much tell two stories. You know, one guy that's obviously been scratching and clawing his way to become the champion, like Leon Edwards. You know, now like we're well into his title reign. Like he's clearly on the rise as one of the best welterweight champions that we've seen. And you got Colby coming back, a former champion, obviously. It's been as long
interim
as
though. Feel the need to. I mean, like we know that, but just in case there's like casual viewers, just don't want to like get it mixed.
And so you know, I think we would just be beating a dead horse at this point if we bring up whether or not he should have even been fighting this fight, and obviously the backup fighter Belal Muhammad just watches. But it happened. We got it done, and that's the result. We go in all 5 rounds, and we just, Leon, like, you know, what more does the guy really have to prove at this point instead of just, you know, etching his name as one of the greatest welterweight champions of all time? So, I mean, there's nothing you can knock about it. More on Colby Covington's part. It's like, what was going on in there? You know what I mean?
I think there were probably a lot of factors. You know, for one, as much as I'm not even trying to make an excuse for him, this is more, I mean, you have to just acknowledge this. It's almost been 2 years since his last fight. I mean, we talked about it in the preview. Colby's last fight was the first podcast we did, like covering his fight with Masvidal. And it's been that long. So ring rust had to play a part. I mean, he looked so slow, especially in those first 2 rounds. It just looked like Leon it made it look easy, honestly. And, you know, I hate that people on social media are kind of shitting on the performance, saying that, oh, well, Leon was talking all this about finishing him. And, like, it's hard to finish a guy who's backing up the whole fight and not engaging. And to go, you know, piggyback off that to talk about Colby, for a guy, and, you know, I had strong thoughts on this on Instagram too, like, he talked a lot of crap at that press conference and went to some places, you know, about Leon's dad, just so low. And you know what I think. I think that this is fighting. People who are offended by words shouldn't be watching this sport, in my opinion. It's not saying that you have to like what Colby says, because I personally didn't, and I like Colby. But even me, like, watching that and seeing it more than one time, it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And, you know, anything about family is kind of just, like, makes you cringe a little bit. And in this one, it was just really rough to see. But for Colby to go there and then to basically shit the bed like that in the main event, he looked like he was fighting more not to lose than to win. It looked like a guy who didn't want to take chances, was timid in there. And really, like, the only round that he won on all the scorecards, Leon defeated him by a unanimous decision, all 49-46s. Colby, the way he fought in round 5, if he would have fought that way throughout the whole fight, it might have been a little different. But I still think, with hindsight, I think Leon would have won that fight regardless, even if Colby was active. Just looked like he was on a different level in there. I mean, he was made it look easy on the feet. And Colby Covington, D1 wrestler, All-American, and Leon Edwards out-grappled him for the most part in that fight, and almost even was trying to submit him at certain points. It was just an amazing performance.
To me, it seemed like Colby needed to beat Leon on the feet, and clearly you saw too. Leon was holding, he was dominating Colby with the grappling too. So I could understand that, but you would think that would probably, especially since obviously Colby is a wrestler first. You would think that when it comes to having to stand with a guy, especially like Leon Edwards, that probably I guess maybe you put an emphasis during camp and then it shows itself during the fight, but it looked like the complete opposite there.
Yeah. Honestly, I will say, and this is a credit to Leon more than it is a knock on Colby, it was incredible to watch him defend those takedowns. I mean, Colby got him down, I think, once or twice throughout the whole fight, and Leon's takedown defense against a wrestler of that caliber, and then also reversing him at points, out-grappling him, like you said. I mean, he just looked stronger in the clinch. There were times where Colby was trying to take him down, and it looked like he had nothing for him. And I think some of that, too, is caused by the damage done to his leg. I mean, that has to impact your power going in and, just the strength that you have to lift somebody. I mean, it's just tough, and it's all because of how good Leon is. A lot of people were saying, oh, Colby didn't show up, this and that, and, they are right. But I also think that Leon Edwards made Colby Covington look that bad. And I think you could really make the argument that that was the worst performance of Colby's career. And that's brought out just by how great Leon is. Because Colby had that one loss way back. I think it was Warley Alves. But he came into that fight hurt and he got finished. And it just wasn't a good fight. But he had a reason to lose this fight. Colby was off for a couple of years. And like you said, you could argue that he didn't really deserve this title shot. I mean, we're going to talk about Belal in a second, but Colby got it. Leon beat him. Now Colby's 0 for 3 in title fights. I can't imagine he gets another shot at 170. He would have to go on a crazy run. But in terms of the championship, Leon has now defended his title twice, and there's a lot of options for him. I mean, because Belal, I think, is the shoe-in pick, right? But then you also have Shavkat on this card who had a great win, and people are talking about him too. So I'll ask you the question, even though I know what your answer is going to be, because I think me and you agree on this. Should it be Belal or should it be Shavkat next for Leon? Because even Leon was like, oh, he's not. I didn't like that he said he wasn't going to give the shot to Belal. I still think that fight's going to happen, but just, I don't know.
Yeah.
For a guy because I'm sorry to interrupt you, Billy. Leon, all that time, was the guy who had that win streak, and everybody was like, nah, not yet for Leon, not yet. And for him to kind of do the same thing to Belal was kind of surprising to me, but at the end of the day, I still think that fight might happen. So my pick is Belal. I'm assuming yours is the same, but I'll let you kind of give your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think it's really just, it truly is I think because before, when we were previewing this pay-per-view, I mentioned that it's not really a matter of, I think it should go without saying that Belal Muhammad clearly deserves this shot more than a Colby Covington, for instance. But that's not what we're that's never gonna happen. If Colby Covington is ready, available to go, he's getting that shot first, and understandable. And now that you've got the result of the title fight between Colby and Leon, and it went the way it did, they're really you had the guy Belal come in, he made way as a backup fighter, all that, I think there's really no running from it at this point. I don't know if it's something to do with how the first fight went and the eye poke and everything, but I especially now with Shavkat's rise too, I just think you get that fight done. I think it's just something that you have to do at this point. Shavkat is obviously, he's still obviously as young and in his prime as he is, there's time for that. I'm sure that's going to come way sooner rather than later, too. But
That's we'll get to. That's for sure.
Yeah, so...
And then Colby, like I said, 0 for 3 in title fights now. After the fight, I will admit, a lot of people didn't like this, but him still trolling after the fight in the post-fight interview was kind of funny to me. I was laughing because one of the times, like, there's a shot of him, like, talking to Joe Rogan. He has blood going down his nose and a huge scratch across his forehead. And then he actually says with a straight face,
Yeah.
I don't have a scratch on me. I'm like, how can, like, I know that people hate the guy, and especially after this, I know that he lost a lot of support. But to me, like, you can't help but laugh at something like that because, like, I get it. Like, he's not the human being that a lot of people want to get behind, especially at this point. Because, you know, like I said, you talk all that trash and go as low as you go, and then you kind of just wilt in that spot there. It is kind of funny that he keeps the character even in that. But hey, I mean, according to him, it's not a character, but you never really know with him. But he called out Wonderboy as the fight that he wants next, and I see what he's trying to do because Wonderboy is another guy who has a big name, but he's kind of getting up there in age. But at the same time, I kind of think about the fight stylistically, and I kind of like it because people act like Colby is like 29. Colby Covington's 35 years old. Like, he's starting to get up there in age too when it comes to that division with all these young guys coming up, like you mentioned Shavkat before. But I think stylistically, like, Colby's not much of a striker. The striking exchanges that he has when he's successful, it's pushing the pace on guys, those 1-2s, all the kicks. But against a guy like Wonderboy, it's harder to close the distance. And now we know Wonderboy's not as good against wrestlers, but if Colby can't get close, kind of like he did in this fight, that could be an interesting one, especially like, you know, fight night main event or a 3-round fight on a pay-per-view. I think that could be really fun. But what did you make of Colby's post-fight demeanor and like that call out?
So I guess in terms of the call out, I think a lot of people, especially now, I think a lot of people are seeing as like, okay, like, you know, it's clear now like Colby is ducking the real top contenders in the division. Like, obviously he just fought Leon, who's the champion. Like, what are you gonna do? That's the ultimate goal. And so now you've got a Shavkat. You know, it already started with Belal Muhammad essentially. But you know, there was still a path, still a route from Belal Muhammad to take, now get himself as much as the backup fighter for this fight. And so then with Shavkat, obviously, like, you know, you just mentioned Kobe, you know, how Colby himself is getting up there in age. Like, you know, maybe you do see another Shavkat Rachmanov finish, sure, but like, what good's that gonna do for Colby Covington at the end of the day? So like, that doesn't. I would say like, yeah, whenever we fight, like, you got lower stakes and whatnot. Like, that would make, you know, I think that would be like a lot of sense for a lot of fans to like get into. A lot of, you know, people that have been watching for a while now, like, yeah, this is a good fight we can get into. It's just obviously at this point in their careers, like, on the downtrend, coming off of losses, you know.
Yeah,
So,
and I think Colby kind of knows that if he can get Wonderboy down, he can probably keep him there because of his wrestling. I mean, Wonderboy's not the same level of grappler as Leon Edwards, and I don't think like physically he's as strong on the ground as Leon. But we gotta just like end it really talking just about how awesome that was for Leon Edwards. You know, when Colby went there at the press conference, you could say that he either was gonna take that to heart and fight angry and maybe make mistakes, or it would unlock a new level of like potential in him, and he would show up in the way that I think he showed up in this fight. So I think Leon Edwards is one of the good guys in the sport. I think fans are starting to see how great he really is now. He's beaten multiple fan favorites. He's on one of the craziest unbeaten streaks that we've ever seen. And let's get Belal that title shot next. Like, I love Belal, but I'm also like, I'm tired of hearing him complain on social media. Get him the shot.
yeah.
He deserves it. I get it. He deserves it. He needs to get the shot, because if I have to see one more angry Belal tweet or Instagram post, I'm going to be so pissed, because I agree. He deserves the shot.
Yeah.
So let's get it to him. He did his job. He weighed in as the backup. Let's get him that shot before some other new contender emerges. But let's get into the co-main event, the other title fight on this card. Alexandre Pantoja versus Brandon Royval. And this fight was a rematch, obviously, and Pantoja takes it, so he's up 2-0 on that series. Unanimous decision. two 50-45s, 49-46. And with this fight, the first thing I really want to say is I love flyweight title fights, man, because that fight, all 5 rounds, crazy pace. I mean, from the opening bell, when Pantoja just immediately takes the center and starts just not like whooping, but really piecing up Royval. And I almost think Royval was caught by surprise, not thinking that Pantoja was going to start off with such a sense of urgency, because we talked about it in the preview. Pantoja is a very patient and poised fighter. So, like, for him to start the fight, a 5-round fight like that, was pretty crazy, but his jiu-jitsu looked amazing. His grappling just was outstanding. And Royval is always that guy who's going to attack submissions in crazy places, and we saw that a few times, but overall, really, this was just Alexandre Pantoja imposing his will on Royval, man. But what do you think of Pantoja and just what he was able to do in there in the co-main?
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you when it comes to these flyweight title fights. I just think that, especially with the stakes obviously being so high, like, these guys are moving even quicker than they already do. And so, in Pantoja's case, like, this is just a true technician that, I think he's truly, like, got this division in a stranglehold right now. And he's making, like, a true mark for, like, the best champion we've seen since Figueiredo. So it's cool to see, especially the rematch here with Royval. Like, you could see, like, Royval, like, he really wanted this one. And it's just, you feel for the guy because it really wasn't close to fight. It's just unfortunate, but man, like, there's when you're faced with Pantoja's, like, I think, like, it's clearly out now. Like, it's crazy that there was talk, and then obviously, vouching for your case, like, you've been calling for this guy to get the title shot for, like, way before he even was really seen as, like, obviously way before now that he's a reigning defending champion. So,
I mean, because when Brandon Moreno was champion, Pantoja already had 2 wins over him, and he was a top 5 guy. And I'm like, he deserves the shot. I get that he's, like, a respectful dude. He doesn't really, like, sell the fight in the sense that, like, Colby Covington does, really. But, like, people love this guy. I mean, like, I remember after he got the title in his last fight, he was talking about, like, how he grew up without his father because, like, he left the family. He's like, "Are you proud of me now, Dad?" And, like, so many people resonated with that. And, like, this dude's such a humble and great champion. And we're seeing that now in this fight with Royval. And I like I said, I'm not sure right now who beats this guy, because right now at flyweight there's really not that many contenders. I put on the outline here that Moreno and Albazi are fighting in early 2024. I don't know if you can really give Moreno another shot, but if Albazi wins, I think he's the shoo-in for the title shot at this point. And I don't know, man. I you know me, I think Pantoja is such a good fighter, and I just don't see right now someone beating him. But I do want to also say this, going back to, like, the fight itself. You mentioned Royval, like, clearly leaving it all out there, and I wanted to talk about round 5 in particular, because
that's what I really had in mind.
Right, because he went out there, man, and he left it all out there, and it just sucks because at the end of the round he got taken down. You could see he was giving it everything to try and get up. And sometimes you're just in there with a dude who's just better. And on the ground, Pantoja is so good. You could argue he's got the best jiu-jitsu in that division. It was just incredible. I give Royval respect for trying to win that fight in the final round and truly laying it all on the line in that final round. But Pantoja, he's the man. He proved it once again. And I'm honestly really curious to see what happens next at flyweight, because I think that this guy has the potential to become a bigger, not like a superstar, because he just doesn't talk enough to really get that mainstream credit. But I think MMA fans are really starting to appreciate just how great this guy is and how humble of a champion he is. It really feels like in the main event especially, but in this one too, like, the good guys, they're getting some in this card. So I was pretty happy with it. But let's talk about one of the other big welterweight fights on the card, and that was Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Wonderboy Thompson. We talked about them a little bit when we were talking about the main event. And Shavkat, man, he's just something else. I mean, 18-0 now with all finishes. He submitted Wonderboy in the second round and completely neutralized Wonderboy on the feet. I mean, he was able to put him up against the cage and just control the fight from beginning to end. And he did all of this with a torn muscle in his ankle, which makes it even crazier because like Wonderboy is the type of fighter who doesn't matter how good you are. There's some people who just can't deal with that weird karate style. But Shavkat, man, he just looked outstanding out there. And you see now why we're all talking about this guy and how, like I said, Belal is the shoe-in for the next shot. But because of how awesome this performance was, people are actually talking about Shavkat. And if it wasn't for Belal, I'd say he probably does deserve a title shot just because of the record that he's had and all the people that he's really beaten, especially lately with Jeff Neal and Wonderboy, and like those fights were nuts. And I know that this fight was a little less exciting, but the finish, he's the first guy to submit Wonderboy. That's crazy. Like, this dude's amazing. So what do you think of Shavkat's future? Do you think that like he even needs another fight? I get that Bilal's probably going to be first, but do you think he should sit and wait, or do you think that there's something else in the meantime?
I think at this point he's definitely earned the right to sit and wait. And like as far as the finish rate goes too, like man, it's for as unprecedented as something like this is, like you have to think like sure the competition is gonna get tougher and whatnot, but you think like man, this could really like keep going. Like he's gonna get these bigger fights, you know. That means more and more 5-round fights. You get 2 extra rounds to finish somebody. Like it's really like something that I never thought I like would see in this fashion. The way Rachmanov, because Rachmanov's like I think he's been here for a little while now. And like 18-0, like it's that record says for itself. But when you obviously factor in how they've all been finishes, it's a really fun story to watch. And it's like man, for him to submit Wonderboy like that, just freaking outpowering Wonderboy in every sense of the fashion. Like man, you could just like see it. It's like there's not much you can do about that.
Yeah, man. And like I think about Wonderboy's career too, and you know, Shavkat being the first guy to submit him. When Wonderboy fought Tyron Woodley, and this is prime Tyron Woodley, he had Wonderboy in one of the deepest guillotines that you'll see, and Wonderboy toughed it out and got out of it. So like the fact that Shavkat is the guy to submit Wonderboy, and I get that Wonderboy's older now, but he has a style that age doesn't really impact as much because he hasn't taken that much damage throughout his career. Yeah. But Shavkat has really made his case, man, and like you said, he seems like he's one of like the younger guys in the division, but at the same time, he's been here for a little bit and he's beaten on some good guys. He's a contender, and you could argue he's one of the top contenders. Now, with Belal probably getting the next title shot, I was like looking through the welterweight division a little bit, seeing like if there is another fight that could make sense. And the only thing that I could think of is Gilbert Burns is going to be fighting Jack Della Maddalena pretty soon in 2024. I think that he might be able to get the winner of that fight, depending on the timeline, of course. But I agree with you. I think that he can sit there if he wants. But I would love to see either.
This
you know what
division, I mean,
it's crazy.
especially when you have to prep for a guy like, you know, obviously in this case Leon Edwards. Like, you know, I would want to make sure I'm as ready as possible.
Yeah, and honestly, for me personally, like Jeff Neal and Wonderboy, they're good, but they're like just like the step under that true top echelon, and that's kind of like why I'd want to see him fight that winner of Burns and JDM.
You really do just see it with Shavkat. He really has just at this point, like he truly is like in that. It's tough. I really want to say he's truly in that main event scene, but I guess we just can't. We just have to still wait and see. But man, he just keeps impressing more and more each fight.
I think he'll keep impressing, and you know Leon's the champ, and I think it's going to be a tall task to get a win over that guy, especially with how he's looked since winning the title. But he's a nasty fighter, man. I could definitely see him doing some damage in this division. You know, maybe could be future champion. Like I said, welterweight has had some legendary champions over the years. I mean, GSP obviously for such a long time. Usman had a great run, and now it looks like Leon Edwards is on a run of his own. Who knows if Shavkat can be the guy, but it seems like we're getting closer and closer to finding that out. So I was super excited by this win, and we'll see what happens going forward for him. But the next fight, I think all MMA fans, whether you like Paddy Pimblett or not, we're kind of saddened by the outcome just because Paddy Pimblett defeats Tony Ferguson by unanimous decision. And we'll talk about Paddy, but I think the bigger story is now Tony Ferguson has tied the UFC record with 7 straight losses, tied with BJ Penn. Not a good thing to do, and it shows you how crazy that this sport is. 12 straight wins, right to 7 straight losses. It's just so unfortunate how Tony's career has gone so downhill. And even Dana at this point said that he thinks that Tony should retire. And I kind of feel similar to Dana in the sense that I feel weird sitting here saying that a fighter should retire. At the end of the day, it's up to the guy. But as a fan, it's rough to see Tony Ferguson take this level of punishment in what seems to be every fight. And then, it's 2023 at this point, about to be 2024. He hasn't had a win in years at this point, since before the pandemic, which is crazy to think about from a guy who was regarded as so good. And it sucks, really, what's happened with Tony. And Paddy Pimblett looked really great in this fight. And, you could argue that's because Tony might be over the hill a little bit. But even besides that, his striking looked a bit more crisp. He still has his chin up in the air and gets hit too much, which I honestly believe will be exposed at some point when he gets into the rankings. But I don't even... You could start this wherever you want, where if you want to talk about Paddy, you want to talk about Tony. What did you think of this fight as a whole?
In terms of Paddy's part, with him being the winner and all, I thought that was this was definitely one of the more fun fights. I think just coming in, it was going to be one of the more fun fights of the night, and I think it definitely panned out. It was, for instance, Tony Ferguson, not getting, but because it did feel at time, especially in that first round when Paddy was clearly emptying the tank to finish Tony. You obviously you're not too so sure that it's gonna happen because of how sloppy Paddy's striking remains, but things are moving. You think Tony's gonna engage himself a little too much again, and then he's gonna get caught with something, but. Tony, I'd say he'd stayed grounded for the entire fight, and that's just where we are at this point in time. Paddy Pimblett is a better fighter than Tony Ferguson in 2023, and that's fine and all, I think with Paddy, his, I think in terms of this performance right here from where he was before, I feel the grappling is something that he can certainly keep latching onto, of course, but as you said, if he's gonna stand with guys to start, of course, then he's just not able to get somebody, on the ground or in a clinch in any way, then he's really got to watch out for leaving that chin hanging, and then making sure the striking is more polished. But man, it was just it was nice to see. It was nice to see the respect afterwards to Paddy's and obviously how. The press conference goes and whatnot. That's just a fight game, at the end of the day, these two guys, they went in there, they had a job to do, and one guy came out on top. And
and I agree with you too with the game plan, especially with his grappling. I thought, and I said this in the preview, I thought Paddy would be best served to take Tony down just because of that striking, and especially in that third round early on, you could kind of tell that Paddy was exhausted and really labored on his shots, and Tony made such a mistake not keeping that on the feet, and then he lost it really in the grappling exchanges, and that's exactly what I really figured would happen if he was going to go there with Paddy, because, again, this isn't the same Tony Ferguson that beat Kevin Lee and all those guys on that win streak. It just isn't. And he still has those elbows and those little tricks off his back, but it's just not the same anymore. He doesn't have the same effect on guys, and it's almost his nickname's El Cucuy. We haven't seen that boogeyman in him in a very long time, and it just, I don't know, man. I don't really know what's next for him.
You can't even, I don't even think you can really give him the tag of being a gatekeeper either, per se. I think it's kind of, in a way, it's like a Cowboy case where a Cowboy's, he's fighting all these these true up and coming contenders, and he's either gonna put up a fight, go every single round and lose by decision, or he's gonna get finished. And that's just that's obviously when it's it's time to hang it up.
I think it's almost it's crazy to me that he's tied now with the most losses in a row and tied with BJ Penn, because when I think about them, it's honestly pretty similar, because BJ Penn's another guy who in his prime was like a world beater. No one wanted to really fight him. He was so good in every facet of MMA. He's a tough, gritty boxer, great jiu-jitsu. And Tony Ferguson is another guy like who had such a great streak, and obviously BJ Penn was undisputed champion at certain points, but Tony never was. It's just sad that Tony's career has kind of gone down that BJ Penn route, because you think about a lot of the people who've become fans since the pandemic, it's just rough because they're not seeing the Tony Ferguson that we saw.
And he's been active. He's been very active since the pandemic.
And it's not the same guy. And that's how I felt when I was watching BJ Penn, because when I became a fan of the sport, that was kind of when BJ Penn's downward slope kind of started. And I remember like hearing from, guys like Sean and like the people who were watching way before me how great BJ Penn was when he was in his prime. And I feel like nowadays, kids who are getting into the sport, they're not going to know how great Tony was unless they go back and watch those fights, because you watch him now and it's like a completely different fighter. And it's really sad to see. But to end this more on like a positive note, for Paddy Pimblett, biggest win of his career, I think by far. He looked a lot better in this fight than he did in the Jared Gordon fight. And I think that a ranked opponent is next for him. I really think it has to be.
Yeah.
And it was just a really, really good win by Paddy.
And that's, and to like, I guess to track back until, I don't think I would even give Tony the tag of being a gatekeeper, but it's like, did Paddy really have to go through Tony Ferguson like nowadays to get a ranked opponent?
Well, the thing with the gatekeeper too is like the gatekeeper wins and loses some. Tony's losing every fight.
True, yeah.
You're not a gatekeeper when you're just basically opening, and I'm not saying like literally, but he's opening the door for these guys really. And it just sucks to see. You have David Goggins in his corner. There was so much hype behind that, and I knew that was bullshit from the start. Yeah. All respect to him and whatever, but because he's a veteran, obviously I respect that, but it's just with MMA, you can't overtrain like that, especially like when you're 6 fights deep in a losing streak. What's David Goggins going to give you in the corner besides motivation? I don't think Tony needs motivation. The motivation should be to win a fight. You know what I mean? Exactly. 6 straight losses. I think he's motivated enough, but it was fun for the theatrics, I guess, behind the card, but. Like I said, biggest win of Paddy Pimblett's career.
It's just,
worst loss of Tony's.
It's just tough, because I think it's just guys, making an example out of Tony Ferguson, and it's like he should go out on a better note than that.
Yeah, and it sucks too because it puts the guys who beat him in like such a weird place in the press conference, because instead of being asked about their win, they're being asked about Tony Ferguson, and I can't blame Paddy for the answer that he's given. I think that Tony could beat guys that are maybe outside of the top 15 like a bit on a lower level. Because, what do you want him to do? You want him to say Tony's over the hill and discredit his own win? It sucks. For like I said, Paddy said this in the beginning. It was a lose-lose situation. I honestly thought that Paddy really got the best out of this that he could have. I thought he won a lot of fans back with the respect that he showed and just how dominant that win really was, and overcoming the adversity in the last round to really secure that victory in the end. But this is the fight game, and no one, maybe besides John Jones and GSP, no one really stays on top forever. And Tony Ferguson is on the downtrend, and Paddy Pimblett is going up. And there's still holes in Paddy's game, but this was a good win for him, and I think that we're going to see him against a truly ranked opponent next, and I think that's what's going to be the true test for him. Sorry for that quick cut. We had a quick technical difficulty that I had to deal with, but we're back. So let's talk about the final fight on the main card that we need to talk about. Josh Emmett versus Bryce Mitchell. And this was a fight that I'm pretty proud that I got almost exactly right in the preview, because I said this was either going to be a submission for Bryce or a clean knockout for Josh Emmett, and obviously it was the latter of the two. Josh Emmett with just one of the craziest right hands you'll ever see. Knocked Bryce out cold. It was a great knockout. I don't want to take away from that, but at the same time, it was also one of those moments where you really remember just how dangerous this sport could be. I mean, when I saw Bryce convulsing after that knockout, I've never seen that in MMA. So like that was kind of tough to watch for a second, and shout out to Josh Emmett too for when he noticed that he didn't really celebrate. And I think it's hard to celebrate too when you see things like that. But when you get past that, Bryce is okay now, which is awesome. So glad to hear that. And just what a good win for Josh Emmett. I mean, Bryce stepped in on short notice. I think Bryce is pretty beloved when it comes to MMA fans, and Josh Emmett's a guy who's been around for such a long time. The hardcore fans really like this dude too. And both of these guys were trying to get back into that upper echelon at 145, and Josh Emmett did it in spectacular fashion pretty early. Just what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, man, just super. I think this fight had one of the better, because like it was so bound to end in a finish, and yeah, man, that was some scary stuff right there for sure. Definitely a reminder, but like yeah, man, I thought I had fun with this fight. It's a big win for Josh Emmett getting back on track, and like I think Josh Emmett definitely had more to lose too, and for him to get the win in that fashion was how
you could argue that was one of the best knockouts of the year, honestly.
Definitely.
And like I said, like the after part of it was like a bit frightening, but knowing that Bryce is okay now, I think you can kind of give it the credit that it deserves for just being such a legendary knockout. I mean, that right hand, dude, it was crazy. Just hit him right in the forehead, and Bryce was out like a light. It's unbelievable. Like, there's not really much more to analyze in that fight. I mean, because we talked about it. Bryce isn't really the most clean striker, and if he wasn't going to be able to get Josh to the ground, that Josh Emmett has that lights out power in his hands, and Bryce really felt it more than I think a lot of people have. But before we move on to our prelims of the pod that we picked, prelims that we wanted to give a shout out to before we go, I think that there's an obvious next fight for Josh Emmett just because of like the way that the rankings are. But Arnold Allen and Movsar Evloev are going to be fighting in, I think, January at UFC 297. I would love to see Josh Emmett get the winner of that fight. I just think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, to go to the rankings, we're recording this on Monday, so the rankings haven't updated yet. But as of right now, Arnold Allen's number 4. Evloev is number 9. Obviously, if Evloev gets that win, he's in the top 5. And Arnold Allen's already in the top 5. And Emmett is right on the cusp. He's at number 6. So I just think it makes total sense. He deserves a step up. And if Evloev gets the win, like I said, you're still technically going to probably fight a top 5 guy in the division. Just makes a lot of sense to me. But I guess with that, we'll kind of move on to the prelims. And I'll get into my prelim of the pod first. And that is Cody Garbrandt versus Brian Boom Kelleher. And there were so many prelims to choose from on this one. Like I said, I think this card had some of the best prelims of the year. But I love Cody Garbrandt. I think a lot of real MMA fans love Cody. He's so fun to watch. In a win or in a loss, he always brings entertainment. He's such I think a big part of the bantamweight division, even though he's kind of slid down a bit since he was champion. But this was a huge win for him. It felt like vintage Cody. We were watching just amazing power, and it was kind of similar to the Emmett knockout in the sense that it was so clean, and we knew it right when the punch landed that it was over. And I just thought it was such a big win for him. I think it's a big win in terms of where he's at in the division, because Kelleher, he's a bit of a, we were talking about gatekeepers before. He's kind of that guy who's on the outside of the top 15, who's a tough fight for people who don't take him seriously, but Cody took him seriously. And that showed in the sense that he got a crazy knockout. And I love the call out to Davison Figueiredo.
Yeah, man.
I think it makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense.
Because he talked about it, I mean, the fight was supposed to happen, but then the pandemic kind of screwed that up. And I think that it still kind of makes sense. Obviously at this point it would be Figueiredo taking a step down in the rankings to fight Cody Garbrandt. But at the same time, Cody Garbrandt is a huge name in the sport. And getting a win over him means something, no matter where he's ranked in the bantamweight division. Because we've talked about it. Bantamweight, you could argue, is the best division in the UFC. So I had to pick that. There were so many other ones. The one that you're going to talk about in a second here is another one that I think was awesome. So I'm going to let you get into that, man. What was your prelim of the pod?
Yeah, man. So I mean, I had one women's fight to obviously keep an eye out for previewing this card, and it was another that just, man, that's freaking stole the prelims and just fight of the entire card, honestly, between these two. Irene Aldana and Carol Rosa just putting on an absolute banger. Like the arguably the best women's fight we've seen in the year, and the last card of the year. I mean, golly, these freaking two went to war, dude. I mean,
Yeah.
so in this first round, man, like with, Rosa just absolutely chewing up the legs of Irene Aldana, and from the jump, like you saw obviously in the main event, how Colby's leg was compromised to start, and that obviously played its part throughout the entire thing. Here, man, Irene Aldana just fucking flipped a switch from round two on, and like obviously Carol Rosa was still trying to attack the legs, but man, Irene Aldana just like was really putting it all together, like on the feet somehow with that leg, and by the end, it really seemed like an absolute like lock that, yeah, this decision is gonna go to her, and it really was just all the way down to the final bell. Like, they neither of these two were letting up for a second, and that's that, man. And then I mean, just to give a quick shout out to the Ariane Lipski and Casey O'Neill fight, freaking dominant performance from Lipski.
Queen of violence, that's
Yeah,
for sure.
a lot of people I think will really put on notice now. Obviously, Casey O'Neill, making her name heard around and whatnot. Obviously, not one of her best performances in any way, but man, like I think in Lipski's part, like we've got a surging contender on our hands.
Yeah,
But
because
that,
Casey, I mean, you mentioned it obviously just now. Casey's a tough fighter in that division. She's more of a prospect, but I still have belief that she'll be near the top of the division at some point. And for Lipsy to get a win like that, I would argue that was like an upset because Casey, like I said, I think of her as a future top contender, maybe even a future champion. It's just it's crazy, man. The women's fights honestly on this card really delivered. I mean, Aldana versus Rosa was insane, and I do want to give credit to Aldana too because she has added to that ongoing feeling in MMA and in boxing. Honestly, it's crazy how tough like Mexican fighters are in like the face of adversity. Because I think about other people in the UFC,
yeah,
Kelvin Gastelum, Yair Rodriguez, and just oh my god, Alexa Grasso even.
lacrosse, yeah.
Like there's so many Mexican fighters who have taken damage and then they go back to win the fight. And in this fight, it was a classic. That was one of the best fights of the year. I think you could argue that might have even been fight of the year. Just how awesome that was from beginning to end. I really enjoyed watching it. I rewatched it a couple times before this. And if it wasn't for Cody's win plus the smart call out, I probably would have picked this too. And it was just an amazing card, honestly, from start to finish. Like I said, we got bonus fights in the stands with Strickland and DDP. Just an amazing, amazing night for combat sports. But before we go here, there was one thing that happened after the card in the press conference that almost like went unnoticed, which is crazy. But Michael Venom Page is signed with the UFC. It's pretty awesome. I mean, for those who don't know, long-time Bellator welterweight contender, one of the best strikers in the sport, and a lot of people have been wanting to see him against better opponents for a very long time, and now we're going to get it because he's fighting Kevin Holland at UFC 299,
Yeah.
and it seemed like that was almost like just brushed aside because of all the crazy things that happened on the card, but it feels like the first time in a minute that the UFC has gotten like another top contender from another promotion who has a lot of hype behind him, because I'm super stoked that MVP is in this division and now he's getting thrusted into the top 15 at welterweight. This is going to be so awesome. I think it's great for the UFC and just another big name, honestly, to add into the sport. But I'll ask you this really before we go. Do you think that Michael Venom Page has the potential to become champion? What do you think his ceiling would be in the welterweight division? Especially nowadays.
Yeah,
There's
that's
so
the
many.
thing, and I think with him fighting, obviously someone like Kevin Holland, you're getting a top 15 opponent right off the bat. that's really going to be telling of like where he goes from here. If I had so, if I more want to make like kind of like a prediction of the fight in a way, and I think something would be in line with a lot of grab. It's just I guess if Kevin like I think Kevin would want to work obviously with the reach advantage and with the being the bigger guy and whatnot, like probably would want to just keep Michael Venom Page's obviously elite striking at bay and not really give him any space to work with there. So just maybe a lot of clinching and
Then again, Kevin Holland is also the same guy who went to war on the feet with Wonderboy Thompson. So
yeah,
it's not like he's
dude.
scared.
And that's what I love about this dude, man. Like his style. Like I think it's really just an awesome blend with whoever is across from him. And so hopefully in this fight with MVP, it's just gonna be it's gonna be nonstop action. You guys are gonna put a hurting on each other. And
I think it's a great first matchup
yeah.
and a great introduction to the UFC. I think the fans are really going to love Michael Venom Page if they didn't know who he was before. Like I said, I know he kind of gets some flack for maybe not having the strongest level of competition, but I mean, this guy's fought Douglas Lima. I know he lost, but Douglas Lima was a bad dude when he was champ in Bellator, man. And now he's fighting Kevin Holland. I think it's a good matchup for him, another striker. I really do think the same thing that you think. I think it's going to be a all-out war, maybe. I mean, who knows, though? MVP has that same kind of level of striking as Wonderboy in the sense that he's able to keep people at a distance. But Wonderboy versus Holland was crazy, which makes me think MVP versus Holland will also be crazy. And I'm super excited for it. I'm super excited for 2024. Like I said in the beginning of the show, we've covered everything from 2023. We hope you guys have enjoyed it. Stay tuned next week. Like I said, the day after Christmas, top 10 moments in combat sports 2023, our picks. And that'll be it from us. So we'll see y'all.
See you next year.
Feel just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you going hard.